I have another video for you guys that I thought about earlier this afternoon. A guy in my car club recently decided that he and his wife were gonna take up automotive photography, or just photography in general, because they attend car shows, they're active in the car club, etc. So he asked me, hey, what camera is good to learn on? What's the best camera I should buy? Best bang for my buck? What editing software should I use? And it kind of struck me that, and this is with anything, people who aren't involved in photography or aren't involved in sports or aren't involved in this, that, or the other don't really know where to start or what to do. So I told him, look on YouTube. There's a ton of different people who give photography tips and tricks. And the more I was thinking about it, you can just get lost in all the information that's out there for photography. What I wanted to do was I wanted to provide a little short video of 3 things that you should keep in your mind when you are just starting out in photography, specifically automotive. This can obviously play into other photography types, like landscape, even portraits. But just to give you a background, I haven't really talked a lot about photography on my channel just because I talk mostly about cars, but I have been dabbling in photography since about 2004, 2005-ish. So about the last 14, 15 years, and by no means am I a professional, but I enjoy doing it. I learn every single time I go out and shoot, and I want to give you some tips and tricks that I've learned over the last 14, 15 years that if you are just starting out, maybe you can be a little bit ahead of the game or ahead of where I was at your level starting out. So I want to share these with you. Hopefully they're helpful. Obviously there are a ton, but these are the 3 main things that I always think about every time I go out and take a picture. So let's jump right into it. The first tip that I have for you is gonna be angles. So not only am I talking about the angle of the subject that you're taking a photo of, like a car, but also the angle of your body, where the camera's at, to the car. So one of the biggest things that I see whenever I see somebody starting out in automotive photography is I see just a standard walk up to a car and take a picture. No movement, no nothing. So one of the, I think, quickest ways to make your picture look ahead of the game or look a little more towards the professional side is getting level with the subject. So instead of you taking a picture and looking down at the car, it's getting even with the side. It just gives it like a much richer, professional, artsy kind of feel. So as I was editing this, I realized I forgot to say something pretty important. If you have a lowered car that you're shooting, or if your car is lowered, or if you want it to look lower than it is, or if it's stock and you want it to look lower, whatever the circumstance may be, you can create an illusion of the car being lower than it is or having a better stance if you get level with the car. So that's one thing I like to do because I do have a lowered car. I always like for it to look lower than it is. But that's one thing that I've seen, and I've noticed other photographers taking pictures of stock vehicles or even cars that have been lowered, taking it from, I don't want to say the wrong angle, but a higher angle, and it just almost looks weird. It doesn't look low. So if you get level with the car, it's going to create an illusion that it's lower than it is, or it's going to look lower than it is. So I wanted to throw that in there real quick. Now there are some circumstances where it's obviously not required, or that I would even suggest the further back you get from a car, I would raise up higher. So maybe being at that level is a good spot. But I always see people walking up maybe 5-10 feet from a car and taking a picture just at their normal height. They're 5'4", they're 5'8", they're 6 foot, whatever. If you get down to the level of the car, especially if you're taking a horizontal shot, it just looks so much better, in my opinion. Now, again, just kind of prefacing the next 2 tips and tricks, and just kind of giving you this after I've already said the first one. This is all my opinion. This is what I've learned over 15 years. Take it or leave it. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. Just something I wanted to share with you guys. All right, so my next tip is going to be lighting. Lighting is probably one of the most crucial things that you should keep at the forefront of your mind because it is so visible. There are people who like kind of a blown out look. I actually kind of like that. I like the sky to be super white unless the clouds are purposeful in my photo. Then I like them obviously to be in focus, but I do like a blown out look. So you can definitely have light used to your advantage, and it can definitely be detrimental, which that's what we'll kind of talk about with automotive photography. So I'm going to show you a picture right here where I could not help the lighting. There are ways to defeat this, but the way this is right now, you can see it, and it was too much sun, way too much sun, but I couldn't help it. So I would have rather gotten a picture than not gotten one at all. So we're gonna go into what you kind of need to look for or what you need to keep in your mind when you're gonna take pictures. Set the scene. You want to take pictures of your car. It's super, super sunny outside. The things I would recommend to keep in mind are looking for places that have adequate shade, a lot of shade, creating your own shade, like placing your car under a tree, in a downtown setting where the buildings tend to cast shadows. If you absolutely cannot avoid the sunlight, I'm not gonna really get into what your camera settings should be, but first and foremost, if you're just jumping into it, you're not familiar with camera settings, just be sure and have it on auto. That's gonna be the easiest for you. And before you take a photo of something, you know how you can kind of click down on the button? You don't click down all the way to where it takes a picture, but you click down on something to focus on it. Make sure you're focusing on the subject so that has the, I guess, most appropriate lighting around it. Other things that aren't focused on, those can be blown out, but you want to make sure your subject isn't, because once you get in post, it's going to be really hard to get back any kind of detail that the light's blown out. But if you do take pictures in the sun, like I said, you may not be able to avoid it because of a car show or something like that. What I do is I take a picture with the sun on the subject rather than the sun behind it. If the sun is behind the subject, it's going to cast a bunch of shadows. However, the good thing about digital photography is you can literally take pictures from every angle. So the angle, first thing we talked about, you can take a picture on all sides of the car. So you can take a picture where you're gonna see the shadows cast. You can take a picture where the sun's directly on the subject, and you can kind of choose from that point what you do like and what you don't. The last thing is going to be, what was it? Oh, appropriate lenses. Now, I love kit lenses. I love the kit lens that came on my T6i. I used it for a long time. I use it primarily because it's a really good lens. Now, I think personally, and this sounds really cliche and it's kind of stupid, but the best camera that you have is the camera in your hands or the camera that's with you. So that is one thing I thoroughly believe in. I will show you a picture right now that I took with my iPhone, and it's one of my favorite pictures I've ever taken with my taken of my car. Or it may even be my favorite picture I've ever taken in my life. Either way, I love that picture, and I took it with my iPhone. We all know the iPhone 11's out, which is really cool. I kind of want it. But it comes with that super wide angle lens. Now, I'm gonna give you examples of when a wide angle lens is appropriate, because it is not always appropriate in photography. It's gonna morph things, it's gonna distort things, it's gonna make things look wonky. But here are some areas in which a wide angle or super wide angle lens is going to come in handy. Actually, first let's talk about when it's never. So if you're ever taking a picture, it's horizontally set, so it's just across. I am a huge fan of those pictures. Never. It's gonna end up distorting the line that you're looking to capture. So sometimes whenever it is appropriate though, if you are on the exterior of the car, you're super, super close to the car, and you wanna get kind of, you know, the front bumper angle, that would be a good time. The further you back up from the car, the worse it's gonna look. It's gonna make it look tiny. It's gonna look weird. Other appropriate times, the interior of a car. I'll show you a shot right here. I took the interior of my E30. You see, I was able to get the whole thing. That was a good use of a wide angle lens, which I'm actually filming on right now. An engine bay is a really good example of when to use a wide angle lens. Just kind of always keep the rule of thumb. The more subject matter you want in a photo, that would be an appropriate time for a wide angle lens. You're able to fit a lot of subject matter in a really small space, and that would be appropriate use of a wide angle lens. But there aren't a lot of really good photography examples where a wide angle lens would look good for automotive photography. So just kind of keep that in mind. But like I said, the best way to learn stuff is to just go out, shoot, practice, take pictures. You'll see this one I took with my BMW like the first day I got the lens. It was so bad, but I was like, oh, this lens is so cool. But now that I know more about the lens, now that I've like practiced more with the lens, I'm like, that was the worst picture I could have taken with that lens. So that's it. That was it. That was the 3 simple tips and tricks that I have for anyone who's looking to jump into automotive photography. Again, I'm not a professional. I've just taken pictures for a long time, and I feel like I may have learned some things along the way that I would like to share with people who are just starting out. They're all my opinion. It's nothing more than that. It's just my opinion. So if you like the pictures I take, that's what I keep in mind. I keep in mind the angles, I keep in mind the lighting, and I also keep in mind the appropriate lenses. So, or I guess inappropriate for kind of what we talked about. I'm gonna throw in a bonus one real quick because I was just thinking about this. Don't over edit your pictures either. A lot of photographers just starting out, and I did the same thing when I started out, I thought the more like off the wall different it looked, the cooler it looked. For a while, I never really got into it because I could never figure out how to do it. HDR was huge, and that's where it almost gives your photo or your subject like a comic look. It's really weird. It does look cool on some stuff. Some stuff you're like, whoa, tone down the HDR, like you can see it. So it's just, I want to say the less the better, but just don't over edit your pictures. That's a big way to be like, oh, that picture would have kind of looked cool if, you know, you couldn't see 7,000 pounds of HDR on it. All right, well that's it. Those are my 3 tips and tricks and my little bonus feature at the end. Again, there's other videos on here that are very helpful. There's just a lot, so I didn't want it to be overwhelming. I hope mine came in handy. If you liked it at all, give me a thumbs up. If you are not subscribed, subscribe. I think that's it. Just 3 simple tips and tricks and a bonus one at the end. I hope you guys have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Don't know what that's gonna be, but I will see you then.